What's going on, guys? Carmine here, and welcome to another Game of Thrones review, and this time we'll be focusing on the second episode of the new season, and I've got to say, overall, it was pretty good. Dare I even say, slightly better than the premiere episode, but there were one or two things that kept it being completely amazing, and I think some of you will agree with me on it. If the premiere was a 4, on a scale from 1 to 5, this episode would be a 4.3. It's better, but just slightly, and it's all thanks to a few people carrying it through. As always, the Q&A video will be out tomorrow, so leave your questions in the comments below, and we might cover them in the next video. And for those of you wondering when the next episode of the podcast will come out, expect it sometime before Friday. But let's get to it. Also, before we begin, a big shout out from Quid for sponsoring this video. From thousands of stickers, collectible cards, and toys from all your favorite shows, Quid is the best app for the internet collector in all of us, or those who want to spice up their phones. From Rick and Morty to Game of Thrones, Quid offers a fun way to interact with all your friends. It's out now for both Android and Apple devices, so head on over there and download it today. Link below in the description. Okay, so first I want to get one thing out of the way. It's Arya. She absolutely was fantastic last episode with getting rid of House Frey, or at least most of them, and slightly fell off a little during that Lannister soldier meetup. I will say I'm very, very disappointed that the opening scene of Arya for episode 2 didn't open up with her walking away from those guys being killed in their sleep. As we saw in this episode, when she meets up with Hot Pie, she seems a little detached from everything else, and is almost robotic when it comes to just talking. So you might as well have her fully grasp the role of cold-hearted killer who loses part of herself with each kill confirmed. It would make more sense to me, and even later on with Nymeria. I do like how that scene forced Arya to face her own past, and how it rejected her. She's not Arya anymore, despite rejecting the Faceless Men, she is still no one, which is probably why Jaqen had that grin on his face when she left. I just hope the showrunners give us a more conflicted Arya this season. I want them to show us more of her brutality and disconnect from normal everyday life, rather than her just sitting down and chit-chatting with Lannister soldiers and looking forward like a blank robot. Nymeria's rejection was perfect for that, and reintroducing Hot Pie to serve as something to move the story along for her is getting old, and I feel bad for the guy, but at least we get to see him one last time before the series ends. Also, that bit about her making pies was great. But the Arya stuff this episode, it was alright. I just hope we see her struggle with how broken she is, but we'll discuss that later on. However, let's see what you guys had to say. From YouTube, Justina says, I hated the solution of the Nymeria scene. What the fuck, HBO? They are putting everything into dragons, and did they just say a final farewell to Nymeria, or are they just teasing us? I will agree that HBO hates putting the direwolves in there and would rather focus on the dragons. I mean, Ghost is not even around as much anymore, which is a shame, because I love him. I will say that I hope we don't see Nymeria again, simply because I don't want a bullshit Hollywood scene in which Arya is in danger and all of the wolves come out of nowhere and rescue her. I hope Nymeria stays gone, and that Arya is truly shaken up from being rejected by her direwolf. In a way, I guess you could say it's symbolic that the Stark child is being rejected by the other wolves. It's a nice little foreshadow of things to come with her character. That being said, on Facebook, Emir asks, what do you think will happen to Arya after all is said and done? I honestly hope she goes back to Braavos and continues being a faceless man. The one thing I want from Arya at this point is the whole you can't go back type of mentality. She's a killer and I want her to enjoy it. While the struggle of her maintaining to lead a normal life is cool and all, I want her to be addicted to it and ultimately go back to Jaqen and finish her training and just solely do that. It reminds me of that scene in the Hurt Locker where Jeremy Renner's character goes home from his tour of duty and he's bored by civilian life. I want Arya's bittersweet ending to mirror that. To be her struggling to live as a normal girl, like she used to, and then ultimately go back to the Faceless Men. To me, Arya doesn't have a happy ending anymore. Her future is death and blood, and that should be addicting for her. The real struggle is not to love it so much. I would love that for her character, and for her, it should be a rush to go in disguised as someone that her target loves and watching them die with a look of confusion as she twists that blade. It's sadistic, I know, but it would be such a great conclusion for her character, especially if she ends up killing Cersei with Jaime's face. Once again, it's sadistic, I know, but like Peter Dinklage said, if you think this has a happy ending, then you haven't been paying attention. Next, let's talk about Sam and Jorah Mormont. While Sam seems are normally okay at the Citadel, despite the gross stuff we had to endure, I think him and Jorah meeting up is quite honestly the biggest bullshit I've ever seen from this show in a long time. What are the odds of that? Don't get me wrong, I like Jorah's character and I want to see him reunite with Dany. It's just that I don't want it by coincidence with Sam, but instead with black magic. Having Grayskull be cured should be, in my opinion, a double-edged sword. While you won't die or lose your mind, you'll lose control of your left hand or whatever. I just don't buy Grayskull being cured by dragonglass. It reminds me of like MacGyver making a gun out of paper clips and toothpaste. Like, what the fuck? What a coincidence. Also, I just don't learn. I don't. I made the mistake of eating during the last Sam scenes last episode, and I made that mistake again. I don't learn my lesson, so if you all want to get on my case for it, I deserve it. I do. But as I said last week, and I'll say it again this week, it would have been so much better if the Lord of Light followers cured Jorah, but as a result, he loses part of himself and feels a strong disconnect from him and Dany. Like, I don't know, the price of being cured is that he can't truly touch her or feel the warmth of her skin anymore, or something like that. There is no worse punishment for a man in love to be unable to feel the love and warmth of the woman you're into. It would have been tragic and would have been... It would have brought some sense of balance to the show again. You know what I mean? But let's see what you guys thought. On Patreon, Darren, he's on my case. He says, Carmine, I know you dislike that Sam is going to cure Jorah with dragonglass. I get why. Not only is it a weapon for killing White Walkers, but it also cures a deadly disease. But how is the Lord of Light followers curing Jorah a better thing? Like I said, if they cure Jorah, then, as with most black magic in this world, there will be a consequence. That is what we're missing from Game of Thrones. Consequence. Dany wanted that woman to cure Khal Drogo, and she did, but he was a vegetable afterwards. This may be my fucked up mind coming out a little, but wouldn't it be amazing if Jorah is cured by black magic and, like, he loses all feeling in his left hand, which in my version would be his dominant hand, and then he somehow ends up on the battlefield against Jaime, and they both have to fight each other without their dominant hands, and it takes 3 hours, and then people form the circle around them to watch these two fight each other. It would be so great, but I say this because it would have given Jorah an excuse to go see Quaithe again. For those of you who are wondering why I'm bringing this character up so much, it's because she's a big mystery in the books. Some people believe that she's a secret Targaryen who knows black magic. Some people believe that she is tied to the Children of the Forest. Some people believe that she is Dany from the future. But I just miss the mystery and wonder we're so used to in the books being absent in the show, and I know you guys who only watch the show would really appreciate that. Over on Facebook, Ronnie says, in Old Town they don't cure diseases, they only study them. Sam learned that this episode, and I think that was great. And Oliver backs that up with, I think because of Sam's scenes I start to understand why Qyburn was kicked out. The Maesters are really stubborn old men with old ways of learning. It's also kind of sweet of Sam to help Jorah as a way to pay back Jeor when he couldn't save him. I 100% agree with both of you, but to Oliver and your point about Sam and Jorah's father, I just can't buy that coincidence as legit. To me, at least, it's super unrealistic for everything to be tied up in a neat little bow like that. Sam couldn't help Jeor Mormont when he died, so in return he's gonna save his son Jorah? I don't know. This season feels more disconnected than previous ones, in a sense. All the major characters and fans are getting exactly what they want. Arya getting revenge on House Frey, Cersei's punishment to Ilaria next episode, and Jon making the decision to meet up with Dany. Don't get me wrong, guys, some fan service is okay, but it's also better to keep us down to earth, and that will probably be my biggest issue with this season. I enjoyed episode 1 and I enjoyed episode 2 for the entertainment value, but if the characters keep getting exactly what they want, when they want, then when does it start feeling like a dark fantasy and more like a Michael Bay Hollywood movie? And to Ronnie's point, yeah, I like that too. The Citadel really shows the audience that they aren't the really the great scientists we imagine them to be. They're just old men stuck in their ways who are really too cautious with progressive ideals. I feel like this should have been a big conflict for Sam with how he wants to solve problems, and all they want to do is document them or just put a bandage over it. But with only 7 episodes, I doubt this conflict between Sam and the Maesters will ever fully bear any fruit, but it is fun to think about. Now let's talk about the King's Landing scenes. Unfortunately, they were short but very insightful. I like how Qyburn's little birds have been watching Dany's movements and reporting back what she's been doing, and understandably so. Dany sounds like a big jerk. Yeah, those noblemen deserve what they got, but at the same time, it's not a good PR move for, you know, places you plan to go to. Dany does sound like a really terrible person, but once again, we know the real reason they don't. My one complaint here, though, however, is... and it's a minor one, it's that Cersei didn't blame the explosion last season on Dany's forces as a preliminary attack. She could have easily gotten away with it, but she didn't, unfortunately. I'm also really glad to see that we got Randall Tarley back again, and the actor does a great job at convincing me he is Randall, and I enjoyed his dilemma about which side to fight for. It was good, and this is what I want to see from the King's Landing scenes. Cersei being queen and making moves, and the lords who supposedly serve under her making their own decisions on whether or not to follow the crown or their liege lords. It's also the same dilemma Stannis went through during Robert's Rebellion, and yes, before anybody asks, I did notice Billy Bones from Black Sails has replaced the original Dickon, and I love how they low-key hinted at it with Jaime not knowing who he was. I'm also loving Qyburn's anti-dragon weapons and called back to the skulls being in the throne room before Robert took over. Once again, this is the type of strategy I wanted to see from this episode. Anti-dragon, propaganda, and even later on, sneak attacks. This does feel like a Game of Thrones war now, which I love, but let's find out what you guys had to say about it. From Patreon, Rory says, it really does feel like Cersei has the upper hand here. Dany's inability to charge in there and take over is really fucking her over. I didn't expect Cersei to be drawing first blood the way she is. We all expected Dany to be winning battles left and right. I think we all thought that, and I'm glad we were wrong. Cersei winning the first strike, and a deadly one at that, is great, and it really shows that they aren't pushovers. The anti-dragon weapons are great, and I hope they get some use. I expect them to take out at least one of Dany's dragons, or at least wound them, and it'll be a fatal wound at that. Once again, what we need is something to ground Dany, because she thinks she has the advantage, and this secret weapon will be making some waves in her world and probably force her to be a bit more strategic and to save the dragons for critical times and not full-on assaults. It makes the war a little more realistic and exciting for me. Dragons aren't the super weapons they should be, and they do have weaknesses. It's good to see the opposition take advantage and not be stomped on so easily like we all thought they would be. If Cersei lined the walls up with these things when Dany attacked, then the battle would have been fairly over soon, but I also want to see how they employ these in the field where it counts, so we'll have to see how that plays out. But these anti-dragon weapons have made me really excited to see how they adapt to a whole thing. Next up, we have everyone's favorite character, Jon Snow. Up in the north, Jon has decided to meet with Dany, and I'm glad Tyrion was the one who sent the letter. This episode has a lot of callbacks to the first season, and I like how the whole bastard conversation is brought back up. Once again, people are getting on Sansa's case, and once again, I agree with her and Jon. The north is rightfully afraid of Jon going down there and losing his life like the last two Lords of Winterfell have. We also have Peter Baelish being so damn stupid. Ugh! Okay, first off, he's my favorite character from seasons 1 to 4. Ever since season 5, he's been slowly making mistakes, and he just seems like a burden. I expected a terrible death for him this season, which annoys me because he is crucial for Sansa to evolve and grow as a character. Her defeating him should be a big victory for her, but it won't be because the showrunners don't know how to write a major character's death without George holding their hand. We saw it with the Blackfish, we saw it with Marjorie, and we saw it with Doran, and we'll see it with him too. They only know how to kill off secondary characters nobody cares about, like the Waif and the Sand Snakes later on, but this is truly their bane. Littlefinger in the show just really sucks now, and he's making dumb decisions. Like, bro, come on, you creep on his sister, and now you go and confront him trying to be all sneaky? Obviously, Sansa isn't into you, and of course she'll tell him. You're dumb. Your best bet right now is to go back to King's Landing, tell Cersei your plan, and low-key take Winterfell while Jon is away. Tell Cersei, who wants Sansa dead, that you'll marry her instead, and have the North ruled in your child's name with allegiance to the crown. Why stay with these people when they clearly don't want you around? Oh my god. I'm sorry, but his stupidity really gets to me. But the North in this episode was alright. We get more of that Sansa-Jon dynamic. And I gotta say, I really love the whole, Jon, you going down there is reckless. Don't you remember what they did to our grandfather? I'm leaving you in charge while I'm gone. Well, once you put it that way, have a safe trip. I love Sansa. I love her. She's a hoot. But let's see what you guys had to say. Hops the Drinker says, do you think Sansa will learn anything by being queen as Jon leaves? Maybe by seeing his judgments are the best. Jon putting Sansa in charge is something I should have seen coming, but totally didn't. Sansa's inexperienced, and had we had 10 episodes at least, we could have seen her style of ruling. We saw a bit of Bran's from season 2, but never hers, and I really want to see what she's learned from her time in King's Landing. I doubt Sansa has learned anything from Jon, but has mainly taken her cues from Cersei, which would make this an excellent storyline for her. Northern politics are far different than in the South, and I want to see how Sansa handles it. It'll be very interesting to say the least, but no, Sansa won't learn too much from either Jon or being in charge. She is at that stage where she thinks she knows everything. We've all been there before growing up, so I hope the showrunners have put that in for episode 3, but we'll just have to see. Over at Dragonstone, we get Dany taking Varys to task for what he's done while he worked for Robert Baratheon. I like that we were finally getting this discussion, but I didn't like how she went a little overboard. Yeah, I understand that Dany puts her foot down when it comes to people scheming behind her back, like she did with Jorah, but unlike Jorah, Varys has brought her thousands of allies in both the Tyrell and Martell forces. Personally, I think she should have laid off a bit, but I do get where she's coming from in having him promise her that he'll not scheme behind her back, but actually be honest with her about her methods. I get that Dany has dragon blood, so her aggressiveness is coming out a bit, but I wonder if being so aggressive also means that she's being a little crazy. She is the product of incest after all. In the past, we've seen that give way to some insanity. I'm also really enjoying the scenes between her and the Alliance. Once again, I'm loving the strategy here about her taking King's Landing with Westerosi forces and not foreign ones. I'm also really excited that we'll be seeing Casterly Rock next episode, which is a major Lannister castle, and hopefully we'll have a big battle for that. I'm also surprised Melisandre showed up so early and gave us that prophecy. It was interesting and unexpected, especially when Missandei stepped in and corrected the whole prince-princess side of it. If you notice, Dany thought that she was the one who was promised, but Melisandre never really confirms it. I do wonder what game she's playing at here, and I'm hoping for a private scene between her and Varys. We all know Varys hates magic users. But I also want to give a shout out to Missandei for being a low-key MVP this episode. As a man, I've got to say, God damn, not only is she smoking, but she is so into him, she doesn't care about the, well, you know. I gotta show some respect to her for that, but please let that be the last Grey Worm Missandei scene we're getting for the rest of the series. But let's see what you guys had to say. Tadia says, Dany was spot on with regards to Varys, so what's the problem? It's the moment of truth and she's vetting him. He did send orders to have her killed at one point. She dealt with him respectfully and took him there. Apparently he passed and she is even giving him the benefit of the doubt. I've got to say, I like the way you're looking at it, and I kind of feel bad for doubting Dany's movements here. It didn't seem, to me at least, like she was vetting him, but I hope that is the case. It makes her much more of a player than we initially thought, and it does make me respect her a bit more. She has got to be clever in her own way, and if that's her way of making sure Varys isn't some fuckhead, then more power to her. Mate, and I hope I said your name right by the way, says, is not invading King's Landing really such a good move? I get the reasons for it, but Cersei would not stand a chance. Then they could worry about improving Dany's reputation among the lords and people later on. This won't be a smooth victory for Dany later on. Dany's main issue here is that she wants to avoid as much civilian casualty as possible. She doesn't want to be like her father, who almost destroyed 500,000 people in fire to secure his rule. She doesn't want to repeat that mistake, and who would ever follow her if she wins the throne with fire and blood? Her best strategy is to cut off Cersei's supply lines and have the people overthrow her. That could take a while, you're right. Not attacking is a bad move, but she needs public opinion on her side, and she needs to make sure Cersei looks like a chump. But this waiting will not go over well for her. I do expect by the end of all of this that Dany will not have at least one dragon left, or even maybe none of them. The first move is critical, it's crucial, and she already lost that. We'll have to see how she can recover. I really do like, however, that she's the underdog here, because who would have expected that? Holy shit. And last, we get the best scene this episode, and the MVP of this season, I'm calling it now. Even though he isn't a newcomer, I'm still giving him best newcomer, Euron Greyjoy. Say what you want about Aria, but she also did have the best line this season. Foreign invader? Come on. Who won't be using that one later on, eh? I will say that her and Yara's little lesbian scene lasted as long as it needed to, and it wasn't really cringy as I thought it was gonna be. I found it hilarious, but oh my god, eventually we get Euron. I'm so happy they didn't make him some idiot who just stands back on the sidelines and has his men do the fighting. His entrance was epic, his weapon was epic, and his accomplishment so far, killing 2 of the 3 sand snakes, my god, man. Not just that, but he also impales Obara on her own spear and chokes Nymeria out with her own whip. This is insane and I love it. Can we get a spin-off of him instead of his travels before season 6? My god. I will say my one complaint here is that the fighting was done at nighttime, and that fight scenes themselves were, of course, shaky cam with fast cuts. I absolutely hate that. I'm someone who has a bit of difficulty seeing at, nighttime shots on screen, so it's an issue for me. So I would have rather have them, do it during dusk or twilight, but whatever. I still loved it nonetheless. And I do find it such a shame that Theon ran away like that despite Yara calling him her protector, but hopefully he comes back later on. I don't want him to go down like Duran and the Blackfish did, off screen or in a shitty death scene. I hate to cut this short, but I absolutely love the Greyjoy assault scene. Ship-to-ship combat is something that has been on my wish list for a long time, ever since season 2, and I'm glad we got it. It's just a shame it had to be at nighttime though. But overall, I really enjoyed that entire scene. But guys, that is it for today, but leave your thoughts below and let me know what you thought of the episode as a whole. I liked it way better than the premiere, and the Greyjoy assault scene really held it up for me in many places. The Game of Thrones podcast, episode 4, will be out later this week, so look forward to that, and also be sure to leave your questions below so I can discuss them in the Q&A video tomorrow. But as always, thanks so much for watching, show me some love and hit that like button, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you all next time. Baba Booey.